we find the word chomos mentioned, where the Torah says Hashem found the world rife with chomos, with thievery. So he says that the numerical value of chomos and Gehenum is the same numerical value. Also, Mei Noach, the flood waters of Noach and chomos are also the same numerical value. That because they were involved in stealing and justifying stealing from one another, therefore they deserved Gehenum. And we find that the water of the Mabul, as I mentioned last week, was sulfuric, it was hot, and everything totally dissolved. So that was the punishment. Not only did they die, it's the way they died. Gehenum, Mei Noach were Gehenum. The other thing he says, when Hashem comes to Noach and he says, the end of all flesh has come before me, he says, V'hineni mashchisem es ha'oretz. Now he says, mashchisem es ha'oretz, the first letter of every one of those words, mashchisem es ha'oretz. That's mem aleph hey meya. So he says that before the Mabul, the height of every human being was 100 amos. If you remember, we had said that before Adam had eaten of the Eitz Hadas, his height was from the earth to heaven. After he'd eaten from the Eitz Hadas, the Chazal tell us, Hashem Kaviyachol put his palm on him, and he minimized him to 100 amos, meaning the effect of the evil of the Eitz Hadas had compromised him to a point where he's only 100 amos in height. So it seems to be from the Balaturim, it wasn't only Adam who was initially from heaven to earth, was he minimized to 100, but everyone else had normal height, but rather all mankind, that was the average height of every human being. They were 100 amos tall. This is pre-flood. Hini mashchisim es ha'oretz. The person who's meo, mashchisom es ha'oretz, mem aleph hey, I will destroy them. That dimension of person, which is a semblance of the original creation, that will not exist any longer. Because after the post-flood, the lifespan of people was an average lifespan. It was no longer these endless years. So just as the lifespan became ordinary, something which has relevance similar to what we have today, identically, the height that before the flood was 100 amos, was Adam going from heaven to earth, or earth to heaven, being minimized to 100. Identically, when that was destroyed, there was no longer that dimension of human being. Okay, we're going to start left. There's a question we showed him. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, Asar Nisyonos Nisa Kodesh Baruch Hu Avram. Avram was tested with 10 tests. Everybody agrees, Lech Lecha, the first pasuk in this portion is definitely one of the tests. Lech Lecha me'artzcha m'laretcha, you should leave your land, your birth location, your family, to go to the land that I will show you. All the Rishonim and the Midrash agree that this is definitely one of the tests. The question is this the first of the tests? Because maybe what the Torah alludes to, the Ur Kasdim, because the Torah tells us that Avram had left Ur Kasdim. The word Ur Kasdim means the kiln of Kasdim. Why does the Torah refer to Kasdim as the Ur Kasdim, the kiln of Kasdim? Because it's alluding to what happened to Avram in that location. The location was called Kasdim, but the Torah refers to that Ur Kasdim, the kiln of Kasdim, because the Midrash tells us that Terach, Avram's father, was an idol manufacturer, and he asked his son Avram to mind the store, and he had gone and taken an axe and smashed all the idols. And his father was infuriated, and he had informed on his son to Nimrod. Nimrod was the king. Nimrod gave Avram an ultimatum. Either he bows to the idol, he goes into the kiln. Avram chose, because Avram already recognized that there's only one creator, and he rejected paganism, and that's why he smashed the idols. He would not bow to the idol, and Nimrod says, you will go into the kiln. He went to the kiln. Miraculously, Hashem performed the miracle for him. He came out literally unsinged. Not only was his body not burnt, his clothing came out where it was not affected by the fire. Because the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, Avram had 3 descendants where the same thing happened. In the time of Nebuchadnezzar, who was the Babylonian emperor who destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, he had made a statue of himself, an image, and he said all the subjects must bow to that image, and if they don't, they'll be thrown into the kiln. Chananya, Mishael, Bazario, they were from the tribe of Yehuda, they would not bow to that image. And he gave the order, they should be thrown into the kiln. They went into the kiln, they came out alive. However, the clothing was singed. The bodies were not at all affected, but the clothing was singed. Avram, even his clothing was not singed. So the Gemara says, because Avram was a whole different dimension of tzaddik, therefore he was totally unaffected. Hanan B'Shol Vazari, although they were special, but that special they were not. Therefore, the fire affected them to the point that the clothing was singed. This is explicit in the Gemara. Now, initially, we find that when Avram was thrown into the kiln, there's a malach, there's an angel which was created for fire. That's like the spiritual counterpart which brings about fire. And then there's another angel which is able to cool down the fire, that even though you're in the fire doesn't affect you. So Avram Avinu chose to go into the fire, not to bow, literally to give his life. The Malach says to Hashem, I will go down and cool the fire. Because that's what he was created for, that he's able, despite the fact that you're in the fire, you're able to coexist with the fire. Hashem says no. Because Avram acknowledged me, and he introduced monotheism to humanity, I will go down and cool the fire. In the future, he will have descendants who will give their lives to go into the kiln. You will be there to cool down that fire for them. But this, for Avram, I personally will not allow Avram to be affected by the fire. It's the Medrash. Now, before Avram went into the fire, the Medrash quotes a pasuk from Shir Hashirim that he had said to Avram, or Avram had understood, if you go into the fire, you will be something which will be like a wall that's able to deflect all attacks. If not, you will be like a wooden door that ultimately it decays. Avram says, I will give my life. I will be like that wall that could deflect all attacks. And he went to the fire. And there's a lengthy discussion, and Azolta that he merited to have special descendants, Chana Mishol Vazaria, and many others in the future, because of what he had done. He says, I will be like a choma, like a wall, that you can put a tiras kesef, that you're able to build on it. That's the foundation for a silver edifice on top of it. Not like the door, that when you put etchings on the door, ultimately, the etchings will eventually deteriorate because of the door made of wood eventually rots. That's Avram Avinu. So everybody agrees that Lech Lecha was the first of the 10 tests, was one of the 10 tests. The question is the word Kazdim, given the ultimatum, do you go into the kiln or don't you go into the kiln? Is that the first of the 10 tests? It's an argument among the Rishonim, and from the Midrash it seems that was the first test that Avram was challenged. So the obvious question is, how could that not be a test? Now, if a Jew is given a choice, Do you bow to the idol? Don't you bow to the idol? And you have an obligation to give your life. What is the basis for that obligation? The Torah says, you must live by my Torah, and God says you don't have to die for my Torah. Except there are exceptions where it's a question of Chil Hashem. So when it comes to these three cardinal sins, Avodah Zorah, Gil Harash, Shvichas Damim, these are the exceptions. Because you have an obligation of Kiddush Hashem. I'd mentioned when we learned the Gemara, the Rambam rules that if a person goes and he crosses those lines, and he had an obligation to give his life and he did not, although he's forewarned, he's not liable for the death penalty. He's not subject to death. Why? Because in terms of idolatry, adultery, or murder, or any of those things, because it was done under coercion, the action is not attributed to the person. So if the person was forewarned and bowed to the idol, he's not put to death. Because we have the principle of onus rachmana patre. When you're in a state of onus, you're forced to do something, that action is not attributed to yourself. Nevertheless, the Torah says, being a Jew, you must give your life. You have an obligation. It's called to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. You have to sanctify God's name. And if you don't, you're desecrating God's name. But desecrating God's name, the liability is not the death penalty. Therefore, the Rambam rules in the laws of Yisodi HaTorah that if a person was forewarned not to bow to the idol, did bow to the idol, he's not liable for the death penalty. That chiyuv. So why do you have an obligation to give your life? Although onus rachmana patre, when you're in a situation where you're compelled to do something, the action is not attributed to yourself. As a Jew, you have an obligation, because Torah says you have an obligation to sanctify God's name and not desecrate it. But that obligation is only for a Jew, not for a non-Jew. Avram's status was a Noahite. He's a Ben Noach. Avram had no obligation. Avram, if he would have bowed to the idol, wouldn't have been a problem. Because the Shem Mitzvah Noach, one of this idolatry, that's only if it's through your own initiative. But it's through an external force. Why are you bowing? Because it's a question of your life. One does not give his life. So that Avram went into the kiln and did not bow to the idol, if he would have bowed, he wouldn't have been in violation of one of the Shem Mitzvah Noach. So that he did bow, that was beyond his obligation. That was something, what we call the Fidib Shusadin. He had no obligation. There would have been no liability for him. So as a result of that, not bowing, going to the kiln, Hashem says, because you valued me to such a degree that it wasn't worth living to bow, and you'd rather die, therefore you'll be the founding father of the Jewish people. This is why he's the first of the Avos HaKadoshim, first of the holy patriarchs. But Avram, as a Ben Noach, had no obligation. Because there's no obligation of what? Of Kiddush Shem Shemayim, to sanctify God's name, and you should not desecrate my name. So again, now we have a little understanding why it wasn't a test. Why it was a test. It was a test. Do you go the extra mile for Hashem, or don't you go the extra mile for Hashem? That's the question. He went the extra mile. And because he went the extra mile, therefore, this is one of the levels of advancement, spiritually speaking, that on this we built these were the 10 tests, which Avram was challenged. Is he going to go the extra mile? Doesn't he go the extra mile? Lech lo mi'artzecha, right? Leave your homeland, your birthplace, your family, to the land I will show you. He had no obligation, but despite not, he went, and he negated himself to the will of Hashem, which we can discuss what this is all about. So somebody shown him, they start counting the first of the 10 tests from the Ur Kasdim. Lech Lecha is the second of the 10 tests. And continue counting, which we'll discuss. Now, there's an obvious question. Let's read the first pasuk. The Yom Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecha. What is the meaning? Lech Lecha. He could have said Lech, go. What's Lech Lecha? Go for yourself. Hashem is telling him in advance, it is in your best interest to go. The going is Lecha. You will be a beneficiary of this going. So he's encouraging him to what? To meet the challenge. It's worthwhile to meet the challenge, as difficult it is, because ultimately it's l'chor. The value is you will be the ultimate beneficiary. And where should he go? What should he go? From your land, from your birthplace, to the land that I will show you. We'll do Rashi, and then we'll ask the question. Lech l'chor, lahanoscha l'tovoscha. What's the l'chor? For your benefit and for your pleasure and your benefit. And over there you become this great nation. But until you go there, you will not merit to have children. And you're only going to achieve that level of renown when you go to that land. Meaning, in Ur Kasdim, he was a pariah. He was a fugitive. He was despised. You want to be effective to impact on the world, that will only happen when you go to the land that I will show you. But here, you're not going to have that renown. And he needs that renown, so people should be attracted to him, and he should be impactful on humanity. That's lech l'chor. But it's interesting. Lech l'chor, la'anoschol tovoscho, for your pleasure and for your benefit. So we understand. Here you're not going to have children. There you will have children. Here you will not have renown. There you will have renown. So children, we understand that's in your best interest. That's la noschol tovosko. What about this renown? And Avram Avinu was one of the most humble people who ever lived. There's Moshe Rabbeinu, Avram, and David HaMelech. These were the most 300 humble people who ever lived. And Hashem says, you know what? La noschol tovosko. Here you will not have renown. There you will have renown. I mean, Avram is interested in renown, that he should be acknowledged and valued. What's this all about? But that's la noscha tovoscha. Not having children to perpetuate yourself, we understand. There you will have, that's la noscha tovoscha. But what about the renown? The Midrash tells us that Avram, before he went to Canaan, if you have a flask of perfume, it can have the most beautiful fragrance. If you put it in a cemetery, it's Bein HaMesim. No one is able to benefit from the fragrance of that perfume. So if you want people to benefit, what do you tell the person? You should take the flight on Shel Afar Simon, you should take that flask of perfume and put it among the Chaim. Among the Mesim, there's no beneficiary. They don't have the capacity to benefit from that. But you want them to benefit, bring it about among the Chaim, among the living. Here, all your ability to impact people, you totally be ineffective. It's like you're in a cemetery. You want to be effective, you go to the land that I will show you, that's where you're going to be effective. And Chazal tell us that Avram Avinu, his tent had 4 entrances. Whatever entrance you would enter, whatever direction, you were able to enter into his tent. And his hospitality was one of a kind, Avram Avinu. And the discussion during that time when people come, there was a dialogue. And there was no person who ever entered into his tent as a pagan who did not leave his tent as a monotheist. That's how effective he was. He merited that special siyata d'shmaya to be able to literally change the world as a result of going and meeting this test. But you see something interesting. What's la noschol tevoso? Children, we understand. The person wants to perpetuate himself. But what about this renown? Person said, I'm not interested in renown. Avram understood that a key element for him to be that effective person, to change the world, he needs renown. Because otherwise, he's not going to impact on the world. Avram lived for God. That component of your existence, that you have that charisma, you have that ability to engage with people and people should be attracted to you, that is the bracha. That's lados tovoscha. That is the ultimate, that Avram Avinu was able to be in a position to be able to have the renown to be that effective person, to be God's agent to change the world. That's lados tovoscha. You know, Paul Reichman, Moshe Reichman, Zechron Evrocho, was one of a kind of a Baltstoker. I'm not using the word philanthropist. He was the greatest supporter of Torah when in his lifetime. And he had studied before the war and during the war. There was a yeshiva in London. It was called Schneider's Yeshiva. Schneider's. There's a person today, he's in his mid-90s. His name is Rav Moshe Sternbach. He's from the Sternbachs, who originally came from Switzerland. And he is one of the leading Torah sages, lives in Yerushalayim. And they were studied together in Schneider's Yeshiva before the war, during the war. And they're very good friends, the two of them. And Paul Reichman, Moshe Reichman, became the wealthiest Jew in the world, being so successful. And Moshe Reich and Moshe Sternbach, they had the first name. They both Moshe. He became this world-renowned Torah sage. It's great Talmud Chacham. Moshe Reichman was also a great Talmud Chacham, but not within the realm of Moshe Sternbach. So Moshe Reichman had said that Rabbi Schneider, who was a student of the Chafetz Chaim, who was his Rosh Yeshiva, had given them each a task. They had a study session in the yeshiva before davening. So Moshe Reichman's responsibility was to go to the bakery early in the morning to pick up the fresh bread. That when the students, they eat breakfast, they should have fresh bread every day. Moshe Sternbach's, his responsibility was to wake up the students. They should be able to learn, be in time for that learning session. So Moshe Reichman says, the reason why Moshe Sternbach became Moshe Sternbach is because he had the schus that he woke up the boys that they were able to study. Me, I brought the bread, so to say. This is what he said. So because I brought the bread, therefore, I merited to become so wealthy, to be able to be the Baltstoker, to be able to be the philanthropist, to be one of a kind to support Torah. But my friend, my colleague, my childhood friend, Rabbi Sternbach, he merited the special siyata d'shmai to become this great Torah sage because he was essential in waking the boys up. They should be able to study Torah. Okay? He had that recognition. He says, if it would have been, the roles would have changed, maybe I would have been the leading Torah sage. I would have merited to be that great Torah sage. I would have had that special siyata d'shmai. You understand? He's recognized, but you're the wealthiest man in the world. What you're able to do, what you have, nobody has. It doesn't make a difference. If we would have switched our role, maybe I would have been that. We have an appreciation for that. Despite you're in a position which is envied by the world. Avram Avinu, what's la tovoscha la noscha tovoscha? Renown. What do you want renown? No? You have that renown. There's no door on Wall Street. It's not open for you. Everybody wants to do business with you. That's not Avram Avinu. The renown has nothing with the physical world. It's purely to have that renounce. I should be that impactful person. The people should be attracted to me. That should be effective to introduce them to monotheism. That's la noschel tevoscho. That's lech lecho. Avram went into the kill not to bow, which he had no obligation to die, but because he had such an appreciation for what God is, it wasn't worth living unless you could live as a monotheist, and he's willing to give his life. So therefore, what is first and foremost in Avram's life? To live only for Hashem. Anything less than that, it's not worth living. And the material world is purely and only for that purpose, to facilitate what we call Kiddush Hashem. That was Avram Avinu. That's Lech Lecho. The arts from your land, your homeland, from your birthplace, and from your family. Now, the obvious question is, if a person chas v'sholom is in the situation where the suffering and the abuse is beyond the pale. Avram Avinu was despised by his countrymen. He was despised by his people who he grew up with. He was despised by his family. His father informed on him to be killed because he smashed the idols. He was a fugitive. He was in hiding for 13 years in the cave before he came out because they wanted to kill him because he's espousing monotheism. So Hashem says, this living hell which you're in, which they cannot tolerate your existence, you're a pariah. Leave your homeland, leave your birthplace, leave your family, go to the land that I will show you. You tell me, what kind of test is that? Leave the Gehenna and go to paradise. Where you're at now, it's not a bowl of cherries. It's nothing to even want to be there. You want to flee from there. Now Hashem says, I have the opportunity for you. So what is the test? Good.
So the Meor Kasdim, when he was thrown into the fire, this was the first test, but it was not written in the Torah. Of all the other tests, are they all written in the Torah?
Now, the Ramban writes that that's exactly the issue. If it was one of the tests, why is it written explicitly in the Torah? Why is it only alluded to? The location was called Kasdim, but it's referred to as the kiln of Kasdim. If it's a test, it should be more explicit. Okay? So that's why some Rishonim say that it wasn't a test. But how could it not be a test, right? How could it not be a test? You have no obligation to give your life. And despite that, he's willing to give it all up for Hashem, not to bow to the idol. So seemingly it's a test. It tells you you're at a different level, a different dimension of person. And therefore, the foundation for my existence in this world, you'll be the founding father of the Jewish people. You'll be that patriarch. So Ramban himself addresses this, and he says, what was Kasdim? Kasdim had to do with idolatry. He was thrown into the kiln because he wouldn't bow to the idol. When it comes to idolatry, the Torah doesn't want to elaborate. The Torah would have to really flesh it out. And because idolatry is something so negative, Torah doesn't want to discuss it. As a result of that, it only alludes to the event by referring to it as Ur Kasdim. And we have the Torah Shmal Peh to fill in the gaps. That's the Ramban. It is a test. It was the test, but the Torah only alludes to it for this reason, as he explains. I'll give you an example. The Torah tells us that a person who's liable for the death penalty through stoning, it says, "V'tolisa osolates." You have to display his remains on a tree or on a post, but you must take him down before sundown. Why? Because because the disgrace of God is being displayed. Therefore, you have to take him down. So Rashi over there cites the measures that since the Jew is B'Tselem Elokim, it's analogous to two brothers who were identical twins. One was the king, one was a bandit, and they hanged him, and hanged the people. Everybody said the king is hanging. So therefore, the king is being disgraced because the bandit looks exactly like his brother, the king. Therefore, you take it down. He kills Elokim totally. Okay. So there, the Ramban explains that when the people lose the sensitivity for many things, if it becomes common, and let's say humanity's behavior becomes compromised, people steal and they kill and everything else, eventually the obviousness of the wrong, of the evil, of this type of behavior becomes blunted, people lose their sensitivity for this because they're exposed to it so often. They don't sense the wrong as they should sense it. If you display a person and you make people aware that this person deserves to be put to death, and people are exposed to this long enough, eventually it's nothing out of the ordinary. As a result of that, they lose their sensitivity to that seriousness of crossing the lines where you're liable for stoning. It's the Ramban. We don't want people to be exposed that people are sinners. That people cross the line even means to give their lives. We want people to believe that we live in a pristine society. We don't want people to be exposed to that. That's the Ramban over there. Once you let the cat out of the bag and it's let out too often, people lose their sensitivities for this area of behavior. So I'm saying the Ramban is saying something similar. Torah doesn't want to discuss idolatry more explicitly. It's considered like such an abomination. It's the antithesis of Hashem to any degree. It literally sweeps it under the rug. It alludes to it. So with Torah Sheba'al Peh, we know what it's speaking about. Or Kazda means because that was the event that Avram Avinu was thrown into the kiln because he wouldn't bow to the idol. But to tell the whole story with the idols and this and that, the Torah doesn't want to be more explicit than it is. But nevertheless, it is one of the 10 tests.
So then the time when Rachel,
Terach had 3 sons, right? He had Avram, he had Haran, and he had Nochor. Lot was the son of Haran. What happened to Haran? What happened to Lot's father? Sarah's father was Haran. Lot and Sarah were brother and sister. What happened to him? So Rashi cites the Midrash that after Avram had come out of the kiln, Haran stood by the sidelines and he said to himself, if Avram comes out of the kiln, I will follow Avram's behavior. If he doesn't come out of the kiln, I will bow to the idol. Avram comes out of the kiln, so Nimrod says to Haran, what are you doing? Are you going to bow or are you going into the kiln? He says, I'm going to the kiln. What happens? He goes to the kiln. He doesn't come out. Right? He dies. So your question. And after Avram comes out of the kiln, Nimrod immediately should say, Hashem Elokim. Right? There's only one God. But he's not that impressed. He says, Haran, now what's your choice? In or out? He says, I'm going in. Goes in, doesn't come out. See? That confirms this is a fluke. Avram coming out of the kiln, you never know. It could be black magic. It could be sorcery. Who knows what it is? Proof of the pudding. He bowed. He went in for the same reason Avram went in. So why did he come out alive? So you see, you can't be that impressed. You can't be too hasty with your decision to change your perspective. Okay? I'd said, very interesting, we find that Avram's dedication to his nephew was one of a kind, to the point where he put everything on the line for him. Where even he was considered, he forfeited all his merits of his lifetime when he went to battle against the 4 kings. Because the only way he could bring about such a level of victory, he had to merit the levels of miracle, which was one of a kind. How does one person defeat the 4 mightiest powers of the world? And Hashem had to say, Al Tira Avram, Schor Charbi Mod, you don't have to be concerned, you even have greater reward because of what you did. His nephew's a bad man. Bad man. They separated only because he was a thief, because he had no concern and he allowed his shepherds to steal grazing land. Then where does he move? He moves to Sodom. And after he moves to Sodom, which is these people are evil. And then he's taken captive by the four kings. Avram saves him. Where does he go afterwards? He goes right back to Sodom. Could you imagine? You make a mistake, learn your lesson. Doesn't learn his lesson. And when they separated, Avram says to him, if you go to the right, I will go to the left, or vice versa. But remember, because we're achim, we're brothers, I'm always there for you. And I will always come to save you. The man's a bad man. When he came back from Egypt, when he was wealthy, he told Avram, don't tell me how to live my life. Don't tell me what to believe in. So why was Avram so dedicated to his nephew? And we'll see the Or Chaim Kosh points out, Hashem says to him, leave your family, and who tagged along? Lot tagged along. He should have pushed away Lot. He should have told Lot, you're not welcome. He didn't push him away. Why? So Or Chaim Kosh says again, because since it was his nephew, he didn't want to be too forceful with him. Therefore, he allowed him to eventually, well, after they had the incident with the shepherds, he separated from him. And then it says Hashem appears to Avram, meaning the impediment why Hashem didn't appear was because Lot was with him. But why put up with the man? You know? He's putting himself upon you. Why? So the way we explained in the past was this: the first human being ever to give his life to Mikad Shem Shemayim was who? Was Horon. Even though he had in mind that when he goes into the fire, he's coming out alive. That's what he thought. But he didn't come out alive. But factually speaking, why did he die? He died because he did not bow to the idol. To Avram Avinu, Lot's father, he owes it to his brother. He was Mikad Shem Shemayim. Nimrod was was the most powerful king. It became world knowledge that Horan gave his life not to bow to the idol. That's Kiddush Hashem. As a result of that, Avram held the owed it to his brother. Therefore, he put up with Lot. He was dedicated to Lot. To whatever he could do for Lot, he was doing for Lot because that was his brother's son. It was Lot ben Horon. Not because it was his wife's brother, not because Sarah's brother, but because of his father. That's the reason why he was considered special.